We, my sisters and I, never did not pay enough attention to Joe while he was still alive. I think this may be his revenge. You got our attention now, Joe. When I say I didn't pay enough attention, I don't mean that I was inadequate in my familial duty, though I suppose that's true too. What I regret is that I missed out knowing better a remarkable man. I am mourning my loss, not his. Oh, there were any number of reasons why we weren't closer. For much of my childhood and almost all of my later life, we were physically far apart. I was a preschooler in Edmonton when he was in Vancouver. I was in Vancouver when he was in Ottawa. I was in Ottawa, he was back in Vancouver. Our families had little overlap. There were brief moments of symmetry. When I was about 8, he and my Auntie Eileen moved back to Vancouver from Regina a couple of years before my father, Joe's brother, was transferred to Toronto. And my own family spent 6 years in Prince Rupert from the late 70s to the mid 80s. Not exactly close, but at least we were on the same coast. As a child, my family was mostly in the thrall of the large and noisy Irish clan on my mother's side, the Kellys. Visits with the Atherton relatives were rare, though we did get together at my Uncle Reg's home every Boxing Day and ate roast something, and watched my father and his siblings, after much rye and ginger, perform little skits. My Auntie Marge always donned one of my Uncle Claude's suits and sang Burlington Bertie from Bow. My father, 2 years Joe's junior, would roll up his pant legs, tie his suit coat backwards around his waist, adopt a simpering falsetto, and become a shy little girl performing a lisping recitation. Uncle Joe's performance, meanwhile, was that of a gallant cavalier. That is, he would carry my Auntie Eileen in his arms to the living room. My aunt suffered from multiple sclerosis most of her adult life, and place her gently in an armchair and dote on her for the rest of the evening. This did not impress me as much when I was 8 or 9 as it might have done later. We occasionally did visit Joe and Eileen in their own home, either while we were living in Vancouver or when the family would return from Toronto on visits. And I would marvel, as much as my self-conscious adolescence would allow, at the bits and pieces of RCMP regalia he had on display, or his collection of bows from his days as a competitive archer, or his marvelous carvings like the whimsical hand-whittled and hand-painted collection of Mounties through the ages, now fittingly on display at the RCMP mess in Vancouver. But I was never quite smart enough to put together these diverse elements and realize how much of a Renaissance man Joe was. My wife Maureen and I as adults did get to know his courtly gentleman side before we were married or even engaged. Maureen took the train to Vancouver with a high school friend. They sat up all the way to save money. Maureen had met some Kelly relatives before traveling west, but not Joe, who knew little enough about me, let alone my high school girlfriend. Yet, he made a point to pick up Maureen and her friend, drive them on a tour of Shaughnessy and Marine Drive and Stanley Park, and then take them to lunch at that Vancouver icon, the White Spot. Back in Toronto, I was touched by the unexpected kindness. When we first lived in Prince Rupert, we would fly down to Vancouver occasionally to remind ourselves of city living. Joe, a widower by then, would always know we were coming and always take us out for lunch at his golf club. I remember him so dapper in his tweed blazer, open-collared shirt, and ascot. But then we had kids, and our trips south were fewer and farther between. And by 1984, we were back in Ottawa, vaguely aware of my uncle's declining mental capacity, but focused on kids and work and friends. Joe passed away about 2 years after my father, and nobody from the eastern branch of the Athertons attended his memorial, which I remember being hastily arranged. After his death, we forgot about him almost entirely, I'm ashamed to say. Then a year ago, a lightning bolt. The call from the Vancouver RCMP said, in effect, "We've got your uncle, what would you like us to do with him?" Well, that was a bit of a shock, as you might imagine. But when we heard the story of his clandestine burial and the legend barked, and of the extensive investigation to authenticate the legend, we were captivated. It seemed that one of those fastidiously principled Atherton boys of my father's generation had thumbed his nose at authority in an entirely charming way. To some degree, Joe was hearkening back to his own father, a lovable scoundrel who never let his family's welfare get in the way of a good adventure. We could tell many stories of my grandfather, another J.J. Atherton, but suffice it to say that Joe, our Joe, was among the children roused in the middle of the night in Creston, BC in the early 20th century so that the family home could be rolled on logs to an adjoining property. Joe's dad had just lost his newspaper business in a card game and didn't want to lose the house too. Well, Joe's transgression fell far short of my father's mischief, or grandfather's mischief. He waited until he was dead to break the law. But it was still fascinating, and the RCMP's determination to reinter the remains with all due ceremony gave us an opportunity to learn so much more about Uncle Joe. We knew that he had been on the drug squad in Vancouver, for instance, but not that for years he had overseen operations to quash heroin trafficking in the downtown east side when it was a home to a full 60% of Canada's street addicts. We knew he had spent time in Ottawa, but had no idea that for 3 years he was honorary aide-de-camp for Canada's first homegrown Governor-General, Vincent Massey. Massey was like Joe, a Renaissance man, business tycoon, soldier, cabinet minister, diplomat, collector of fine art, director and actor in amateur music, theatricals. He and Joe would have gotten along just fine. We know that Joe had spent his final years with the RCMP as the commanding officer of the force's Vancouver subdivision, but certainly not that he was so attached to the site of his office at Fairmont Barracks that he wanted to spend eternity there. He was, in short, a man we wished we had taken time to know better. I am jealous of his nieces by marriage, Jackie Stinson and Janan Carr, who flew from Vancouver to be with us today. They got to grow up with Joe, to have him taken to Stanley Park, to learn from him the art of archery, to watch him constantly at work at some new carving project, to witness his devotion to their beloved Auntie Eileen. Joe and Eileen hosted Jackie's 21st birthday party at the RCMP Officers' Mess in Vancouver, and Joe gave the toast to the bride at Janan's wedding. Theirs is a relationship we might have had with our remarkable uncle if circumstances were different. But now we have to thank all those who helped us to forge a new relationship with Joe after his death. Thanks to Corporal Donna Morse, whose tenacious pursuit of the legend of Joe's burial on behalf of the Vancouver branch of the RCMP Veterans Association got the ball rolling. Thanks to Inspector Veronica Fox, who literally sweated out the truth of the burial site while conducting research in the uninsulated attic of the Fairmont Barracks during a heat wave. Thanks to Deputy Commissioner Dwayne McDonald, who recognized the significance of Joe's story and set Inspector Morse to work on it. And thanks to all here who had some part in the recovery of my uncle's remains and in arranging this entirely overwhelming memorial in his honor. On behalf of Joe's family, both by blood and marriage, I have to say we are deeply touched. Finally, thanks to you, Uncle Joe, for being the kind of person who is worth getting to know better, even belatedly. You had 36 years basking in the rising sun at Fairmont, and now you'll rest peacefully in this place that is the heart of your RCMP family. I think you would be pleased.